Absolutely. So sleep is, or sleep disruption, sleep deprivation. So just having like one bad night's sleep, for instance, is so common amongst everyone in the world these days because of various factors, not just light. But when you actually look at a lot of the chronic diseases that are out there, so things like neurological related diseases like anxiety, stress, depression, things like, I guess, sporting injuries can be in there as well, heart disease, diabetes, obesity. Every single one of those diseases is linked to something called a disrupted circadian rhythm. So inside every human being, every mammal, there is a body clock that is governed by external environmental cues. Now that body clock runs on a 24-hour period, and when it is synced to natural light and dark cycles, so this is artificial light aside, so synced to the rising sun, the setting sun and darkness, hormones can regulate correctly, which then leads to a well-balanced physiological system, which then enables us to sleep, recover, perform higher in sort of the next day and the rest of your life. But when we disrupt that circadian rhythm, so we get light at the wrong times of the day, the hormones in our body become out of balance. You might have a reverse cortisol circadian cycle where it's not high in the morning, it's higher in the evening. This will then in turn disrupt your sleep. And then what you find is when you're not getting the clearance of damaged or dead cells from the body, you're going to be leaving a lot of, suboptimal machinery within your body. So you're not going to be able to perform better the next day. Now, with sleep, you get a lot of repair of something called mitochondria. So mitochondria is where adenosine triphosphate is produced, so ATP is for short. So what that does is that takes food, takes light, takes whatever source goes into the body and turns that into energy. And you get from lack of sleep, you actually get a dysfunction to the mitochondria, so it can't then produce optimal amounts of energy. So if you're eating, say, what you perceive as a clean diet for whatever goals you want, maybe it's marathon running, maybe it's bodybuilding, if your mitochondria aren't functioning properly, you're not going to be able to produce enough energy from that food you're eating to then fuel the training that you're doing, or the growth, or even if it's the opposite way around, the weight loss and things like that. So you're putting a lot of energy into the system that then can't be turned into energy through ATP production, which then leads to things like, faulty pathways in the metabolic processes in your body, which can lead to then mitochondrial diseases, the ones that I've maybe just described, cancer probably included in that as well. But what sleep also does is when we burn energy through metabolic processes, now it could just be us talking now, breathing, it could be training really hard in the gym. The byproduct of ATP is something called adenosine. Now what that does is that builds up in the brain when we run processes in our bodies. And when adenosine builds up in the brain over time during a day, we get something developed called sleep pressure. And the sleep pressure is the need to sleep. So there's two types of way to fall asleep. There's the buildup of adenosine, which is the byproduct from metabolic processes, which forces us to sleep. But this coincides and runs parallel to light-dark cycles. So if one of those is amiss, then you're going to have a problem sleeping. Now, what sleep does is, when you mentioned autophagy and apoptosis, those processes actually clear the adenosine from the brain, which enables us to not have neurological diseases, have good restorative sleep, and then feel ready to produce more ATP the next day, and then the process starts again. But if we're not sleeping correctly, which could be a number of things, it could be training too late and being pumped up in the evenings, it could be exposing yourself to the wrong type of light after dark, we're going to disrupt the deep and REM sleep that clears that adenosine from the brain. So it's going to be left, you're going to be feeling maybe the next morning a bit groggy, a bit like, maybe you've had too many pints the night before and you wake up feeling a bit hungover. You're going to get that feeling like every day, just that sort of inability to get yourself going. And that then will relate in poor performance in the gym. And it's just this vicious cycle that over time just continues to get worse and worse and worse. And people it's very much like diets. If people are on a really shoddy diet right now, they'll be like, yeah, I can feel fine. I can lift weights. I look okay. It's not too bad. And it's like, well, come back to us in 20 years time when you've got diabetes, heart disease, stroke, or, you're feeling like shit. The same is true for sleep. People might be able to get by on it, very little of it when they're young. I mean, just look at maybe when we were all perhaps in our teens and early 20s, like I could go out and go on the beers for probably 3 nights in a row, and then, then wake up the next day and be like, right, yes, get back on it, not a problem. Whereas now we can't, because over time, that's probably in my 20s destroyed my ability to do that. The same's true for sleep. It's something that will catch up with us later in life, and then it's too late for people. So you need to take that action now, and whether you have symptoms of, poor sleep now, which again we can talk about later because there's so many of them, whether or not you've got that, you need to take this seriously now, because at the end of the day, sleep is what governs mitochondrial function, and mitochondrial function, is what governs whether we're going to be living a healthy life or an unhealthy life.
And then the mitochondria is really the power cell, really powers everything. When I look at, the chronic illnesses that we deal with the most, we run challenges, and, I've been in the fitness industry for many, many years. The thing that I'm seeing that's on the rise more than anything is anxiety and depression, and especially in young people. And they're obviously exposed to phones and tablets more than the elderly. What can we do for them, and what are the protocols that they should be doing? I think they probably need blue light block glasses even more than the average person.
Yeah, it's for 2 reasons we're seeing an increase from a light perspective in anxiety and depression, because I'm sure there's other things like social pressures and living through social media that can lead to these types of things. But from a light perspective, which I guess is where a lot of my research is conducted in, there's 2 things that happens with artificial blue light exposure to cause anxiety and depression. The first one is by overloading yourself with too much blue light in the absence of the other spectrum of colors. So before I go on to that, I'll just explain that the 2 sources of light are the sun and artificial light. So artificial light is things from like your laptop, your phone, the lights that are above us right now, car headlights, TVs, etc. That's very high in blue light and very low in all the other colors of the spectrum. Artificial sunlight, is very high in blue light, but it's also very high in red, amber, oranges. And blue light is good during the day because it makes you feel alert and awake, but too much of it can damage your eyes, it can damage your mitochondria. And the same is true if you're out in the sun. Blue light will still do that. But what the sun has that is different from the artificial blue light is it has a lot of red light in it. Yeah. And it's that red light in the sun that counteracts that blue light and causes the cells to repair. So you might get some cell damage from the blue in your eyes and skin when you're outside, but the red, whilst being outside, will counteract that and repair it. So in relation to anxiety, without having that red light and repair mechanism, we're getting bombarded by blue light constantly. And if we don't have natural light passing through our eyes, telling our body clocks and cortisol clocks what time of day it is, you'll see 2 things that can happen. You'll see cortisol levels go up and down like a yo-yo. Yeah. Or you will see cortisol cycle switch, whereby you're not getting the cortisol awakening response in the morning, which is what you need to jump out of bed, make yourself feel alert. You're not getting that in the morning, so you're waking up like can't get out of bed. But then in the evenings, your cortisol level's spiking, which means melatonin can't be produced. You can't sleep, and it's that lack of sleep that causes things like the anxiety and depression that we were talking about. And another mechanism involving light that can lead to anxiety and depression is the abuse of dopamine. Yep. So dopamine networks and the neurotransmitters in the brain are in that sort of reward system. So whether you have sex, whether you eat chocolate, whether you take cocaine, whatever you're doing, will trigger dopamine to be released, which makes you feel amazing, makes you feel really good. What happens with any hormone is if you repeatedly raise and fall that, over a sort of an unnatural time frame, you will become resistant to that. So you constantly need more and more of that dopamine hit to make you feel good. And this is very true with artificial light within digital devices and TVs and things like that, smartphones and your laptop, is that over time you become so addicted to it that you find you're just reaching for your phone, scrolling through your phone, and you're wondering, what am I doing? It's because you're getting a hit of dopamine by looking through that. And over time, that will destroy those networks and pathways. So you're constantly looking for more and more hits on that blue light to get that same reward. The same is true like with any hormone. I mean, from a nutrition point of view, if you look at it with insulin, like for instance, if you're smashing a load of carbohydrates, over time you can lead to something called insulin resistance, and that's again the resistance of that hormone. And the same is true for dopamine and melatonin and anything, any other hormone that's produced in the body can be abused. So you just got to be careful, I guess, with the blue light, that you're not continually increasing that dopamine level. And yes, the glasses will definitely mitigate against that, because it blocks that blue, and it's the blue specifically that raises dopamine. So wearing the yellow glasses that we're wearing now during the day is going to stop that happening. But what you and I will do, Mets, is we'll go outside a lot during the day. We'll take our glasses off and we'll allow proper natural sunlight to hit our eyes, which will just be the natural dopamine response. It's not bombarded with blue. You've got all the other frequencies in there that will balance out the other hormones and not cause you to feel anxious and stressed. And another thing that the light side of things, artificial light doesn't increase serotonin levels. There's a lot of real complex, I guess, quantum biological principles involved in the creation of serotonin, but ultimately for this chat now, we can assume that the sun can only do that. It can only increase serotonin levels. And serotonin is produced in the gut. Again, it makes you feel good and happy and really good feelings of well-being. But you also need that later on in the night as well to produce melatonin. But, you're not going to get that serotonin hit as well by looking at artificial devices. So, it's that two-pronged attack of, right, you need to protect yourself from artificial blue light. That's why we wear the glasses. But you also need to be outside as well, because it's all very well maybe sitting in this room where we've got some really bad artificial light here and here and here. We're protecting our eyes now. But if we don't go outside and then get that natural light, we might as well not be wearing these glasses. It's only part of the equation, I think, and the solution.
Part of the solution.
But yeah, a really important one for sure.
So let's go back to, what would a day look like for you if you were to have the perfect balance of getting the right light in, the right sleep in, and obviously using your glasses, because they all play a role. Mm-hmm. You can't just get the glasses, have a bad diet and think everything's going to be all right. Yeah. Because a lot of people might be thinking that, if I get the glasses, I'm going to be fine. But there's so many more factors that come into play in order to get the right sleep, get the right recovery, be in the right mindset, not have the anxiety that people are dealing with now, because they're not getting all the fundamentals right in order to optimize their life.
Yeah, for sure. So, your day needs to be centered around light management, both natural and artificial. So I guess the perfect day would obviously be one where you wouldn't be inside under artificial light at all, but it's just not practical. Yes. Yeah. So we've got to look at sort of practicalities and how, I guess, the everyday person can implement these strategies without really disrupting their life too much. And there's a lot of really easy hacks to do. And I think a good start to everyone's day is watching the sunrise. So as soon as you wake up, or if you can't wake up with the sunrise, initially set your alarm for when the sun is going to rise and get yourself outside. Doesn't matter if it's windy, raining, sunny, whatever, get yourself outside, because the biggest entrainer of our circadian rhythms is the rising sun. So what that does is the rising sun and the frequencies of light that are present at that time of the day passes through the eyes, hits the suprachiasmatic nucleus where the central master clock is located, and it basically says, right, start the stopwatch. Let's go. This is our 24-hour rhythm. Let's get it going. If we don't watch the sunlight sunrise in the morning and we roll over in bed, we look at our smartphone or we switch on a light, that light that's present in those devices is equivalent to solar noon. So basically you're setting your body clock from solar noon if you're not watching the sunrise and you're looking at your phone in the morning. So immediately your circadian rhythm for that day and your hormones are completely out of whack. So you're going to have a phase shifting occur where you won't sleep later on in the day, or you'll crash earlier in the day, depending on your body sort of type, what you're eating and other things like that.